Hey everybody, so oh gosh, I left that light on. So we are sort of on a side path that's probably going to take a few weeks to get through, just because it's kind of important, and it was something I was kind of hoping to avoid just because of a lot of bad experiences with it. But it's time to kind of get over it, try to figure out and to explore it and try to become more positive in this. So yesterday I was playing during the video. I kind of tried to do this. I went console log and this, and it threw an error, and I didn't notice, or afterwards I was playing around and I was like, oh, it will convert it to an arrow function. So because I had tried to manually create it to an arrow function. So there we go. That is our arrow function. So let me hit Control Z. That's a traditional function, and this is an arrow function. So at this point, okay. So just to be clear, like here, this is only throwing an error. Error, I think, personal opinion, it's only throwing an error because the because just like there's no reason for it to throw an error. This is just um, the compiler, the transpiler, or the editors doing that. It might even compile. Um, I guess since there's not actually being used by anything, it's not causing an actual compile. But anyways, this is a thing, and when you create a function like that, the it creates a new this, which overrides the parent's this. It's just one of those things that you'll hear people say from time to time, and eventually it does make sense. So, anyways, this is a function that was created that we copied um, from ChatGPT, that is a validator function, and it's meant to be used um, like here as part of an array of things that a form control does to validate. And basically, the reason it exists is so that your form can know if it's a valid entry or not. Now, when you're doing validation, there's really like there's I think it's sort of a nightmare scenario for a lot of architects particularly, and then they kind of create nightmare scenario for developers. So like, see, this is not this solution here where we create a form, we have an input and all that. This is not enterprise friendly, and the reason it's not enterprise friendly is because, like, if you end up with, let's say you end up with a page that has an application that has thousands of forms on it, which is not as unusual as you'd think it is, and all of those forms have, you know, let's say on average a dozen form fields, you might have 400, 500 positive uh, floating point number uh, messages. And what is a nightmare scenario for like it really, really frosts a lot of vice presidents and high up people when they go through the page and they get like inconsistent messages, like, oh man, I went to this one page and I didn't have a floating point number, and um, it said uh, not a correct floating point number format, and then a different one said that is an incorrect float, and then a different one. They want all the messages to be consistent, and so that's the kind of discipline. Like what'll happen is you get like architects trying to set up a system to where you you where it's a lot easier to, and where it's more natural to like kind of have a reusable message and not the same message. Then on top of that, like let's say like floating point technically is a very very programmy word. You know, like floating point doesn't mean anything to most people outside of math and programming and stuff like that. So they might even be like, this is a terrible word. We don't want floating point. And then if you turn around and say, oh, well, we have to change that in 1,500 places throughout the code, you know, that really ticks them off. And then that's not just going to tick them off too. Like there's a lot of systems where, and Angular is very popular in environments where like modules get, like you have to pay money to have someone come in and say, hey, yes, this is a safe set of code. And so they like to be able to divide things up into modules and say, okay, this is the only module that changed. And so then they only have to get that, you know, license or you know, like a certificate for just that one small set of code instead of all the code because it's the only code you change. But if you had a message like this in 1,500 places and 150 modules, then all of those modules have to be recertified. So that's why they always want to create a system that like has this stuff centralized. But then JavaScript in this sort of way of using doesn't give you the usual sort of tools that you have to be able to reuse things. So you kind of have to do things a little differently. Okay, so that's one big ball of worms that you have to deal with in one thing. Then there's a couple moving parts here. And one moving part is like validation, form validation, like what we have here, where we say, hey, this form and this input is invalid. And it's invalid because it's not the right format. But then there's a whole different concept, which is this key press validation, where you basically disable keys and you say, oh, okay, I'm just not even going to give them the opportunity to type in the wrong thing. And then on top of that, so like in this scenario, we say, hey, you could only type in a period, a negative sign, or a 0 through 9. That's all you're allowed to type in. And we disqualify everything else. But that can end up, so that can be the answer. So, and then you don't even need this other validation, because if you're not even going to let them type in the wrong thing, then you don't need the validation, right? But then at the same time, there are scenarios where you do need to allow them. And like, this is like the perfect scenario. The example is like you're typing in your password, right? Like you're typing in letters, and as you type them in, all of the letters are really good. I mean, are necessary. So that's a thing too, you know. So sometimes you do need form level validation, and sometimes you can handle it with just restricting the key input. So, you know, like disabling invalid characters is enough. And then finally, there's the scenario where, like, I've worked at places where we had like fields where you could only start, the very first letter could only be a C or an F, right? Like it was code or something, and all that. So they just disabled every letter but C or F. And then when that went out, they started getting calls from every single user out there. I mean, the call started going into desktop support because everyone's like, my keyboard doesn't work anymore. See, I'm typing and nothing's happening, because the field, everything was disabled in that field, and it was broken and they couldn't figure it out. So then they called desktop support, and desktop support, like the first time they run into it, might take them like 40 minutes to figure it out. Then after that, they know, oh crap, everyone's using this stupid thing, and yeah, no, that's just that field. And then you find out, oh, they could only have C. So you need, like, just limiting that. Then you also need, like, see, in this example, in the key press validation, they don't give any messaging to tell the user that it's not working. They just disable it, which, you know, like a lot of times is the easiest thing, especially if it's like something that can only be a number and you only enable the numbers. Like that works, or with just a little bit of training. And then that's like a whole nother ball of wax. Like they may train the first people, and then not train anybody after that. So every new person ends up having a really hard time using it. But anyway, so I was thinking about all that stuff yesterday, and that was kind of, those are different ideas. And this morning, those are different things that came to mind. But I do want to build a really good sort of enterprise ready, enterprise friendly and solution here, and that has UI validation, so and has keyboard inputting. And one thing I could do, and I'm not going to, just for the point of the UI validation working, is like, see, this key press validation just lets them put positive, point, period, decimal, a negative, or a number in. And I'm going to allow that, but I could write additional code in here that would prevent it from having two decimals, but I'm not going to do that. So if they type in like 1.000 point something, then I want to see invalid float error. So that's the plan. So we have this, and I don't, yeah, oh, okay, so we're allowing this. So we want to get rid of that. Let's see. I know we did this. So positive floating regex. Okay, so I'm going to change that line of code. Boom. I'm going to change this line of code because now it's broken. Boom. Okay, so for now, all I'm doing is returning this whole function. This is, you call this function and you get this function back. And what this is going to do, is it's going to let me have access to variables and things like that that are in here. So if I were to say, you know, let's go back to the hello equals or hello equals world, and then let's see, I don't know, I do not think, let's see, console log. Yeah, see that? I don't have access to that because it, like, when you give this function out, it doesn't have, you don't know how it's going to get executed. So you don't know if it's going to still have a reference to this. But if I say, I believe if I say const, oh, actually, let me see. Let's try this. Yeah, that's right, because we had seen that we can't do this, right? Because that's a problem. So then we say const hi equals hello, and it's this dot hello. And then I can say, I'm pretty sure I can say const hi, console log hi, right? And so basically this will always keep a reference to this. This is the word. So a reference will be maintained to hi, and hi will have a reference to this, to hello. And so we can do it that way. And it's because when this function was manufactured, it had this behavior, and that was okay. But when function gets called, it's going to create its own version of the variable this, and so it'll be a different variable this, and that's why it's saying, hey, you can't access this. This variable is going to be a new this. So, you know, now in pure JavaScript, you won't have that issue. I mean, you won't have that error show up, but you're going to have all kinds of issues. All right. So anyway, so now we have this function, and we're kind of just doing it this way for now. And And supposedly, okay, let's go ahead and import our UI validation service into the toolbox scene manager. All right, so we're going to inject that whole service into there. We're going to use the inject service. So it's good. I believe it's UI validation. And I guess I put the word service in there. And then it just automatically imported that for me. So that wasn't there before. It just automatically did that for me. And then, so let's scroll all the way to the top. Basically, we want to create an array over here. So, and we want to use the UI So we want to get the result from the call to get positive UI validator. All right, so it is not happy with this. Let's see, form control. So it's not happy with that. So let's go ahead and see if this is. I believe we can just get down and dirty. And we're just going to, for now, put this up here. Let's just have it import that. Import this. And let's just copy this function. And maybe we need to work our way backwards from that. So it is happy with that, which is weird to me. But it's not happy with that. And we saw that's not a very useful error. Sometimes you get a little bit better error down here, and it just is kind of a stalling. So it's the same error. And I believe, let's just copy this. Let's just make sure. I'll just say return. And I believe can we do this? Always get desperate and try the any. Let's see. Okay, so now it was happy with that. Once I made that an any, it did not like this function. Let's see, string. It's one of my oldest tricks in the book here. It's like, That's not a string. All right, so I don't know if you saw what I just did there. Let me close this down. So this is like something I learned when I was working with D3. Um, is like we would spend hours, and I just can't even begin to tell you how many hours we would spend trying to strongly type things like this. And one day I noticed that if if you just mouse over here, it tells you what it was expecting, and then you can just copy that, and you can just paste that in here. You just tell it it's bring back something it's clearly not, and then hit save. Now let's go back over to our here and just like kind of double check that everything. Yep, so that's good. And now we're just going to get rid of this. And this is the time that I generally shoot myself in the foot. And okay, we don't need this abstract control anymore. And I forget to change the code back to only allowing positive. Positive floating values, which was this bad boy right here. So I'm just going to copy the whole darn thing. And I'm going to go back up here. And I'm going to paste that in here. All right, so if nothing, if you learned this little string trick today, you may not know it now, but one point you're just going to be like, oh my gosh, that is huge. I mean, like, I would literally have my work done in like half the time that everybody else would take to get their work done just because of this. And then I would show them this trick and they would just be like, oh my gosh, that is a lifesaver. And then I think management was kind of trying to slow us down. So they didn't like it so much, but yeah, it's a huge time saver. It's kind of hard for managers because they, you know, like a lot of times they have to review a ton of different things. All right, so now we have this array, and basically it's going to do this, and it's good. And for now, we really won't be able to see anything if we do it. But basically, I believe what will happen is the form will become invalid if something that isn't a positive floating point validator finds itself if in there. And we are 23 minutes in, so that's a bit long. Yesterday I uploaded a 55-minute video. Oh no, this morning I uploaded a 55-minute video. I did not get a like on that, and I've been getting a like. So somebody I think I'm communicating. Me and somebody out there, we're connecting. And I think what you're trying to tell me is shorten the videos. Shorten the videos. And I hear you. I totally hear you. So I know this is a little longer, but I am trying to make them shorter, and I hear you. So anyways, happy coding, everybody. Bye.